Original post: my pregnant girlfriend kept stealing money to gamble, so I finally kicked her out. I never thought I'd find myself writing a post like this, but here I am, hoping maybe sharing my story will help someone else going through something similar. My name's Alex, and my girlfriend and I had been together for almost 3 years. Things were serious. We were living together, planning our future, and just recently, we found out she was pregnant. I was excited and nervous, but mostly hopeful about the life we were building. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. At first, I didn't notice anything was wrong. Like most couples, we shared expenses, trusted each other with money, and talked openly about bills and savings. Then, little by little, I started to notice some strange behavior around money at B. First, it was small things. She would tell me she paid a bill or bought groceries, but the receipts didn't add up. Or she would borrow some cash for a day and never mention it again. Sometimes I'd check our shared bank account and notice withdrawals I hadn't authorized or didn't recognize. I asked about it, but she would brush it off with vague excuses. I needed it for something important, or it was just a little emergency. I wanted to trust her, especially since she was pregnant, so I tried not to push too hard. The asking for money became more frequent. Sometimes it felt like she needed more than what was reasonable. Sometimes hundreds of dollars, sometimes just small amounts. She told me it was for bills, for clothes, or sometimes for her family. But the inconsistencies kept piling up, and my gut told me something was off. Then one night I stayed up late and checked our bank account again. I saw a withdrawal to an online gambling site. At first I thought it was a mistake, but when I asked her about it, she denied everything. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the proof was there. Over the next few weeks, I found more charges and saw the pattern clearly. She had been gambling, and she was using our money, my money, to feed her addiction. It felt like a punch to the gut. I was hurt and confused, especially because she was pregnant. How could she risk everything we had for gambling? I confronted her gently at first, hoping she'd open up. I told her I wanted to help, that we could get through this together. She promised she would stop, that she didn't want to hurt me or our baby, but the promises were empty. The lies kept coming, and every time I trusted her, she broke that trust again. She'd disappear for hours, not answer my calls, and then come back with no explanation or excuses. The money kept vanishing, and the debts piled up. I felt betrayed and helpless. Eventually, my frustration turned to anger. I kept asking myself how someone you love could keep doing this, especially when there's a child on the way. I was scared, not just for my money or our future, but for her, for the baby, and for the kind of environment we'd be bringing a child into. The worst part was feeling trapped. I didn't want to be the bad guy, the one who kicked out his pregnant girlfriend, but at some point I had to put my foot down. I couldn't keep enabling her behavior or pretending everything was fine. One night, after a particularly bad argument, I told her she needed to leave. It was the hardest decision I've ever made. I tried to be calm and clear. This wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting myself and our future child. I explained that her gambling was destroying us, and until she got help, she couldn't stay. She was shocked, hurt, and angry. She cried and begged me to reconsider. But deep down, I knew I had to be firm. I didn't want our child growing up in chaos and lies. I hoped this would be the wake-up call she needed. Now, after she's gone, the apartment feels emptier and quieter than before. I'm filled with a mix of guilt and relief. Guilt because I worry about her and the baby. Relief because I finally feel like I'm taking care of myself and trying to build a stable environment for our child. I still don't know how this story will end. I hope she gets the help she needs, and that maybe someday we can rebuild trust. But for now, I'm focusing on healing and preparing for the baby. Sometimes love means making the hardest choices, even if it hurts. Thanks for reading. Update 1. After kicking my pregnant girlfriend out, things escalated. It's been about a week since I asked my pregnant girlfriend to leave. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought maybe she'd be angry, but I didn't expect just how intense her reaction would be. The first day after she left, I didn't hear much from her. I was caught between relief and guilt. Relief because finally, the constant lying and stealing had stopped, or at least the opportunity for it. But guilt because she was pregnant, and now she was out on her own, probably scared and vulnerable. Then, the messages started coming. At first, she sent texts begging me to let her back in, promising she'd change, that she'd get help with the gambling. But as the days passed, her tone shifted from desperate to angry. She called me names, accused me of abandoning her and the baby, and even threatened to expose some personal things I never wanted anyone to know. It was overwhelming. I talked to some close friends about what was happening. Most of them supported me, saying I did the right thing for my own sanity and for the baby's future. A few suggested maybe I should give her another chance, but after everything, I just couldn't. My family was a mixed bag. Some were sympathetic and told me to stay strong, while others warned me to be careful, especially since she was pregnant. They worried she might try to use the pregnancy to manipulate me or take advantage financially. And honestly, those fears weren't unfounded. She started showing up at places I frequented, at my work, outside my apartment. I blocked her on all social media and changed some locks, but the emotional manipulation didn't stop. She sent messages talking about the baby, trying to guilt me into giving her money or letting her back in. She'd say things like, "Think about the baby," or "I'm doing this for us," trying to twist my feelings. At first, I felt torn. I wanted to be there for the baby, and part of me worried that maybe I was being too harsh. But deep down, I knew that giving in would only enable her behavior to continue. I had to set firm boundaries. So I blocked her on my phone, social media, and even avoided places where she might try to find me. It wasn't easy. Each day felt like a battle. Between wanting to help her and wanting to protect myself and our future, there were moments when I questioned myself. Was I really doing the right thing? Could I have handled this differently? Could I have saved her from this addiction? The guilt gnawed at me. But then I heard from a mutual friend that she had gotten worse. Her gambling spiraled out of control. She was borrowing money from dangerous people, skipping work, and isolating herself from anyone who tried to help. It broke my heart to hear that. Part of me still cared for her deeply, despite everything. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. I reviewed our finances, making sure she no longer had access to any shared accounts. I started therapy to process everything: the betrayal, the guilt, the worry. I leaned on close friends and family who reminded me I was doing what I could. The apartment feels emptier now, but there's also a strange sense of calm. I'm trying to focus on the baby, preparing for what's to come, and hoping that maybe someday she'll find the help she needs. But just when I thought I could start moving on, something new happened. Something I didn't expect. Update. How her gambling addiction destroyed everything and what I discovered next. It's been a few months since I kicked my pregnant girlfriend out, and in that time, the full extent of her gambling addiction has become painfully clear. What started as small stolen amounts here and there turned into a deep, destructive spiral I couldn't have imagined. After cutting ties, I thought I was free from the chaos. But through mutual friends and some digging on my own, I found out. She'd sunk into serious debt. Not just hundreds of dollars, but thousands. She was borrowing money from people I'd never met, some of them with shady reputations. I heard rumors that she was skipping work, selling belongings, and even getting involved with dangerous loan sharks to feed her addiction. It felt like a nightmare unfolding from a distance. Finding out these details hit me hard. I felt a mix of anger. How could she put herself and the baby in such danger? And sadness for how lost she'd become. At the same time, there was relief that I'd stepped away when I did. The situation could have gotten even worse if I'd stayed. The pregnancy, which should have been a time of joy, became complicated too. I heard from a friend that she had some medical complications, likely stress-related, and I worried about how the addiction was affecting the baby. Emotionally, I was torn. Part of me wanted to reach out and help, but I knew I couldn't do that, without risking my own sanity. Meanwhile, I focused on my own recovery. I started therapy to unpack everything: the betrayal, the stress, the guilt. I joined a support group for people dealing with loved ones addicted to gambling, and hearing others' stories helped me feel less alone. Friends and family became pillars I leaned on. Their support reminded me that I was making the right choices, even when it felt lonely. She did reach out a couple of times, trying to reconcile. At first, I considered it. Maybe people do change. But after much thought and discussion with my therapist, I realized I had to be firm. The trust was shattered, and until she got real help, I couldn't let her back in my life or near the baby. On the legal and financial front, I took steps to protect myself. I changed account passwords, closed joint accounts, and even spoke to a lawyer about my options to safeguard our future child's financial interests. I realized that addiction can lead people to do things you never expect, and I didn't want to be vulnerable anymore. This whole experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, addiction, and self-respect. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean enabling their destruction. Sometimes the hardest choice is to step away, not because you don't care, but because you care enough to protect yourself. The emotional toll was heavy. I struggled with anxiety and sleepless nights, constantly worrying about the baby and what kind of life she would have. But slowly, I began to rebuild. I focused on my health, work, and preparing for the baby's arrival. Each day felt like a small victory. As I write this, I'm hopeful about what's next. I'm committed to being the best father I can be and creating a stable, loving environment. And while the past still stings, I'm learning to forgive. Not to forget, but to free myself. Recently, something unexpected happened that changed my perspective entirely, but that's a story for the next update. Final update. Moving on after my pregnant girlfriend's betrayal and gambling addiction. It's been several months since everything happened, since I made the hardest decision of my life to ask my pregnant girlfriend to leave. Since then, a lot has changed. Most importantly, I became a father. The baby was born healthy, and that moment gave me a fresh perspective. All the pain, betrayal, and heartbreak still lingered, but I knew my focus had to be on this little life I was now responsible for. Fatherhood has been both challenging and rewarding, but it's also been a source of strength. Emotionally, I've come a long way. Therapy helped me heal wounds I didn't realize I was carrying. I worked hard to rebuild trust in myself, trust that I can make good decisions, trust that I deserve respect and honesty, and trust that I'm capable of creating a safe, stable environment for my child. Co-parenting with my ex has been complicated, but we've managed to establish boundaries that work, mostly for the sake of the baby. I'm careful to keep communication clear and focused only on what's necessary. It hasn't been easy, and I've had to protect myself from manipulation attempts, but knowing the child comes first helps me stay grounded. Forgiveness was something I struggled with. At first, I thought it was impossible, but I realized forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing her behavior. It's about freeing myself from the weight of resentment so I can move forward with peace. I've made significant changes in my life to avoid falling into similar situations. Financially, I'm much more cautious. Separate accounts, stricter budgeting, and clear agreements about money. I also continue therapy and have found new hobbies that bring me joy and calm, like hiking and writing. Building a solid support system has been key. Friends, family, even online groups where I can share and learn. While I'm not rushing into a new relationship, I'm open to the possibility when the time feels right. For now, I'm focusing on myself and my child. The pain of betrayal and addiction doesn't vanish overnight, but I've learned it doesn't define me. Instead, it's become a part of my story, a chapter of strength, growth, and resilience. For anyone reading this who might be dealing with something similar, my advice is this. Trust your instincts, set clear boundaries, and don't be afraid to walk away when it's necessary. Healing is a process, and it's okay to take it one day at a time. I'm ending this chapter with hope. Hope for a brighter future, for healing, and for the kind of love and stability I want to give my child. It's not easy, and I'm still cautious, but I'm finally at peace. Thanks for following my story.